The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Military and Veterans Affairs will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll for today's attendance?
Chair Robinson.
Here.
Representatives Cavett.
Here.
Maddock. Rogers.
Here.
Morgan. Mr. Chair, you have 3 members present. You have a quorum.
Representative Rogers moves to approve the minutes of May 15th meeting. There be no objections. The minutes are approved. So today we're going to hear from Fiscal, the budget overview for Military and Veterans Affairs. I'll ask Fiscal Analyst Aaron Meek to take center stage and give the presentation. And just get settled in, sir, and go ahead and start when you're ready.
Okay. Good morning. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members of the committee. Folks behind me, I appreciate everybody being here. Nice to be back with you all. This morning, I've been tasked with providing the subcommittee with just a brief overview of the current year fiscal 26 budget, as well as a little bit of information on the fiscal year 27 executive recommendation. We'll proceed roughly as follows here. Just a quick look at how DMVA fits into the rest of the state budget. We'll talk just a little bit of a reminder for some of us. It's been a while, so we'll talk about some of the appropriation areas in the budget. And then we will go on to the actual dollars and cents of it all, just a brief funding history, and then we'll get into the real meat and potatoes of this morning's presentation, so fiscal 26 and 27. The last handful of slides are just some supplementary data. This is sort of a rearranged version of HFA's budget brief presentation, so I've moved some of those charts and things towards the back just for quick reference for the committee. Well, that chart did not translate well. Of the state's total budget of about $74.6 billion, DMVA accounts for less than 1% of that. It's that small little purple slice near the top, which you can't really see, unfortunately. Of the GF budget, the department is similarly only about 1% of the state's $14.1 billion GF budget. Hopefully it's more clear on the printouts that you have in front of you. There are 6 appropriation units in the DMVA budget. We start with the military unit. That contains the department's unclassified employees. As of the last report I saw, they had 8 out of the 9 that they're authorized to have filled. This also includes National Guard armories, training facilities, and National Guard operations. The new National Guard member benefit program, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. The Challenge Academy, or MICA, and then the Starbase program as well. Next, we have the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, or the MVAA. MVAA is responsible for administration of various veteran services, outreach programs, grant programs, as well as some general oversight of MVFA. The Michigan Veterans Facility Authority, which is responsible for the state's 3 veterans homes, as well as the veterans cemetery that is on the property at the Grand Rapids home. DMVA gets its own capital outlay unit every year, and this contains funding, mostly federal funding, for special maintenance at National Guard facilities, armories, and then a little bit of general fund dollars for special maintenance at the veterans' homes. Of course, like every other budget, DMVA has its own IT unit. It's a little bit unique in the fact that there's also an additional IT line specifically for MVFA, which tends to be a little bit larger than this general appropriation, general IT appropriation. And then the one-time unit, which a little bit more detail to come here, but that contains Selfridge Air National Guard Base, and then also the Veterans Nonprofit Improvement Grants for fiscal 26. Since fiscal year 2012, DMVA's gross appropriation has increased roughly about 6% each year on average. Recent spikes include in the early 2020s, which I guess we can say now that it's 2026, and that was mostly from an influx of COVID-related dollars and relief funds, and then also again in fiscal year 2023 as a result of about $150 million in one-time appropriations. $100 million of that was for updating armories throughout the state. This table gives a little bit more detail over the last 3 years only since fiscal 24. The top portion shows that all of the recent changes in DMVA's budget have taken place in federal GF and restricted fund sources. Federal and GF dollars generally have increased over this period and beyond this period as well, and then restricted funds have declined a little bit over that same time frame. The bottom portion just compares ongoing to one-time funding, and I would just note that the vast majority of that one-time funding is related to Selfridge. Let's get into the current year budget. So about 51% of the department's $290.2 million budget comes from federal revenues, and that includes, again, funds for the National Guard, the Youth Challenge Academy, the Star-Based Program, and the 3 veterans' homes. More than half of those federal funds department-wide are used to support National Guard facilities and operations and maintenance, things of that nature. Another 44% is general fund revenue, and then the remainder altogether is about $13 million, and that's restricted private and IDG money. There's no local funds in DMVA's budget. The military and MVFA units collectively take up about 2/3 of the department's budget, and then when we account for one-time appropriations here on the general fund slide, about $106.1 million of the department's $128.2 million general fund budget is allocated to the National Guard and to the MVFA. Compare that to MVAA, which you can't see based on the graph here, but MVAA's budget is about 80% general fund. Let's talk a little bit about some of the changes in the current year budget relative to fiscal 25. The current budget enacted last October contains an overall increase of about $14.3 million gross, $10.5 million general fund, as well as a net reduction of 84 FTE positions, again, relative to last year. There's $30 million of one-time general fund, as I alluded to a second ago. $26 million of that goes to Selfridge Air National Guard Base. Since fiscal 23, Selfridge has received about $61.8 million in one-time general fund appropriations. And then the other $4 million goes to a new grant program administered by MVAA, and that is to support facilities maintenance costs at various veterans nonprofit organizations, and that's a competitive grant program administered by the agency. There's also a reduction of about $1.7 million general fund from MVAA's general operating line item, and then also a reduction of 88 FTE positions. Those are unfilled and unfunded FTE positions across all 3 of the state's veterans' homes. So that works out to be a 62 position reduction at the Grand Rapids home, 21 at Jacobetti, and then another 5 at the Chesterfield Township facility. Then the last major new item in fiscal 26 is the creation of the National Guard Member Benefit Program, and that brings existing Michigan National Guard Tuition Assistance Program, or MINGSTAP, resources under a broader umbrella that also now includes child care assistance in the form of stipends to members, as well as a TRICARE health and dental insurance premium reimbursement program. Statutory changes that were enacted as part of the budget agreement last year now allow funds to be used to support all of these programs, not just tuition assistance. Most recent estimates that I've seen are that the child care assistance program will run about $2.3 million, and then TRICARE reimbursements will cost about $1.64 million. Of course, those things depend on utilization by members as well as rates for premiums. MINGSTAP on its own had historically underspent its appropriation year over year. In recent fiscal years, it had spent maybe a little bit more than 50% each year. And so now this will hopefully help with utilization of a larger portion of the appropriated general fund dollars. Some boilerplate changes for current year. There are now more detailed reporting requirements for MINGSTAP, speaking of MINGSTAP, and that includes specifics about the types of programs for which DMVA provides tuition assistance, the types of recipients, whether that be National Guard members themselves or their spouses, dependents, or children who are also eligible for tuition assistance, and then also information about filled versus unfilled FTE positions for the program. Section 316 is just a general fund deposit provision, so that takes the general fund dollars appropriated for the benefit program into the newly created member benefit fund, which is created in statute. The healthcare reimbursement program as well as the child care program are also created in statute. That happened a little bit after the budget was enacted. So the boilerplate sections that are in there right now are sort of obsoleted by that. Reporting for County Veteran Service Grants now also includes more details about the allocation methodology, the process, and the timeline. It requires MVAA to notify the legislature of changes to county grant allocations throughout the process, and then also limits reporting by grantees to MVAA to no more than a quarterly basis. There was or is a provision, it's a subsection in Section 316, that had to do with allowable expenditures that was enacted that was later marked unenforceable afterwards. Section 511 is also new. It authorizes the MVFA to internally reallocate federal revenues as long as those changes do not result in a net increase or decrease to any of the lines. These funds that come in for the veterans' homes in particular tend to fluctuate pretty quickly at the federal level, and so this sort of alleviates the burden on the legislature to have to incorporate those changes into supplementals or transfers at the end of the fiscal year. There's also, lastly, new guidelines, of course, for that one-time nonprofit improvement grant program. Let's turn now to the executive recommendation. A similar table here. The exec rec makes a few relatively minor adjustments to DMVA's ongoing funding, and then also eliminates all current year one-time funding. There's no additional request or renewed request for Selfridge dollars in the current year exec, or the next year exec rec. Much of the shift in funding is, of course, due to the removal of those one-time appropriations in current year. The recommendation also includes a $2.9 million GF swap, so that would reduce the general fund across all three homes by $2.9 million total, and then increase spending authorization for federal revenues received from the Veterans Health Administration. Economic and technical adjustments department-wide work out to an overall increase of about $3.8 million. About $1.4 million of that is for additional Federal National Guard Bureau revenues and spending authorization. That would go to support the headquarters and armories line item at $1 million, and then also the Challenge Academy line at an additional $400,000 in federal authorization. There's a handful of boilerplate changes that are major, as we would say, in the exec rec as well. This list on the slide is not exhaustive, but there should be in everybody's packet HFA's summary document, which does include an exhaustive list of all the proposed boilerplate changes in the exec rec. Should be a 2-page front and back. The exec rec includes changes to Section 301. Those would eliminate notification requirements for new unclassified positions in the department, as well as for substantive changes in the responsibilities to existing unclassified positions. The executive is also proposing to eliminate private revenue carry forward authorization specifically for the Challenge Academy program, nowhere else. And then proposed changes, I'll bounce around just a little bit here, to sections 307 and 413. Those changes would essentially revert several of the reporting related changes that were made in the boilerplate sections that pertain to the MINGSTAT program, tuition assistance, as well as the County Veteran Service Grant program. And then finally, sections 411 and 412 have to do with the veteran service grants, not the county veteran service grants. This would create the Veteran Service Fund in Treasury, but not in statute like CVSF is. And that fund would then handle the veteran service grant dollars that are appropriated every year. And then that in turn would theoretically eliminate the need for the recurring work project authorization that's placed in boilerplate every year for that program. Typically, there's not too much of a carry forward for the VSO grants, maybe somewhere to the tune of a couple $100,000 a year at the most. But this would just essentially allow those funds to continue rolling over in a dedicated fund. Then, as I said, just a few supplementary data slides that I'm just going to go through very quickly. Some of these I'm still waiting on updated information from the department on. One of them is the assigned strength for the National Guard. I only have numbers through fiscal 23 for that, but we can see that towards the tail end of the graph there, there was a a fairly consistent decline in terms of Army National Guard assigned strength. Air National Guard assigned strength has been relatively consistent comparatively. These are some numbers for the Challenge Academy, graduating classes. The department runs 2 classes, one that goes through June, the other through December. And that just shows the total annual graduates. The fiscal year 26 appropriation, current year, for MICA is $10.4 million, a little bit more than $3 million, I believe, of that is general fund. Again, a graph that did not translate very well, unfortunately, but the gist is that the veteran population in the state will likely continue to decline over the next 2 decades. These are USDVA projections, so these are not 100% definitive numbers necessarily, but those projections tend to be fairly accurate. This year, the veteran population is estimated to be about 460,600, and then it will almost be cut in half roughly by the time we hit 2046. This just shows an overview of the various veterans grant programs that have been administered by MVAA over the last 10-ish fiscal years. We can see the 2 years, fiscal 24 and 25. The darker bars there are for eliminating veteran homelessness grants. Those were part of the budget as one-time appropriations in those 2 years. On the far right-hand side, we see the nonprofit improvement grants in fiscal 26, that new program I mentioned. And then throughout this whole period, we've had the VSO grants and Michigan Veterans Trust Fund grants, which are overseen by MVAA but administered more or less by the Trust Fund Board. And then lastly, just a look at where the veterans' home population has been for the last 10 years. Obviously, a pretty sharp decrease across the board, and then a leveling out over the last couple of fiscal years. Of course, Chesterfield is getting up to capacity now. That facility opened in fiscal 21, so there's a little bit of a lag to get those beds filled. But now the homes hover around between 100 and 130 beds that are filled year over year. Happy to answer any questions, of course, to follow up with anything. I know the department is here too, so if it would be all right, I'm sure they'd be
Aaron,
happy
I'm
to answer
going to open up for questions in a second, but I have a question. When's for the county grant programs? Those were started, I want to say, 20 years. When's the last time that number got a bump?
For the county veteran service grants in particular?
Yes, sir.
Generally, there's been a small increase year over year. It's mostly economic increases, just standard adjustments. The last time it would have gotten a sizable bump looks to be, beyond just standard economic increases. I don't have the exact number, but it looks on this chart to be about around fiscal 21. But nothing super substantial since really the program was created and started, adoption became more widespread between fiscal 18 when it started and fiscal 19.
Vice Chair Rogers.
How did you know that was a topic of my concern as well? Thank you.
We're usually on the same page.
That's oftentimes. Thank you so much for your presentation. Following up in that vein, and it's okay if you don't have the answer at your fingertips, if you could let us know, but I would be interested in kind of the exact dollar amount for that program for the next fiscal year in the governor's exec rec. And then just wanted to highlight, we talked about this quite a bit last year. In fact, I introduced House Bill 4423 around it for $3.66 million in the County Veterans Fund. But I don't want us to get, I know we went through, some of the internal things and reasons, and it sounds like the department's made some good strides with corrections for moving forward, which I really appreciate. But it sounds like there is a bigger need than there has been historically. And what was described to us in this committee in the past is that more counties are tapping into this fund for a variety of reasons. I think the cost of living has gone up for everyone, including our veterans. And there is sometimes less opportunity from the feds. We're seeing that on the DHHS side too. So I think the need for county veteran service offices, we're seeing a greater need. So I'm interested in seeing, is that an area, working of course with the chair and the department, but is that an area where maybe we do need to see a little increase? And I appreciate the chair's question that it sounds like there hasn't been a bump since 21. So that's one of my questions is, can you give us kind of like that? Do you have it today, the exact dollar amount?
It should be the same as the VSO dollar amount. They've received parity over the last, I believe, 5 fiscal years. Should be $4,255,500.
Thank you so much. And then a quick follow-up in a different vein, mental health. So we've also talked, I've been a part of military veterans, either the policy committee or the appropriations my entire career up here. So I'm going into my 6th year talking about this. It continues to be a major problem in this state and across the country about veteran suicide rates. I'm very concerned about that. I think all of us, again, agree on we've got to do more to prevent veteran suicide. So is there anything specific in mental health and veteran suicide in this budget recommendation?
Not as far as a dedicated new line item or anything of that nature. The department could probably speak better about the funds that maybe already exist in their operating or ongoing budget that they use for those kinds of services. I'm not aware of anything specific, though.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to talk more offline with you about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions I think I'll later ask to the department, but particularly around the veteran homes line. I'm looking at that 43% reduction in veterans that we're housing at the veteran homes, and I'm curious how that line for funding has changed over the years. I know we've built newer, much nicer veteran homes in the last few years, but we're still housing less people. Are we spending about the same amount on these homes, even though we're housing 43% less veterans?
In general, if I'm not mistaken, funding has actually increased, partially due to some of those facilities improvements. Again, as the raw numbers show a decrease, right, in terms of folks coming in and out of the homes, but services at the homes have become more focused on inpatient care, right, things of that nature, skilled nursing care in particular. And so generally those things are more expensive than just offering sort of more general services to a wider population of veterans who use the facilities. So if I'm not mistaken, I can get you exact numbers for sure, but funding has more or less increased. I'm sure there were some decreases in there, right, but I think in the aggregate, on average, it's increased across all 3 homes.
Thank you. Chair, I think for, I guess more of a comment than a question here is, I think that's something I would love to see us look into more is just, where are we, are we leaving any veterans behind as we look at improved care for them? What are those wait lists if we have them for the veterans' homes? And, you and I have talked a lot about homeless veterans and what we can do to support getting folks into housing, but I would just love to see us look at where are we leaving veterans behind and what more should or could we be doing to make sure we're housing as many as possible, but also providing really good, high-quality care when we are doing so. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we have our work cut out for us with the budget the way it is, but thank you for that presentation. Is there any other questions? Cam, did you have a question?
A comment. I just wanted to echo the Vice Chair's thoughts on our county VSOs, and if you could get those numbers, that'd be great. Thank you.
Like a motion to excuse absent members. Thank you. Representative Rogers moves to excuse absent members without objection, so ordered. Being no further business is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.